I think that Elden Ring's main game bosses are kind of lacking, and while there are good bosses like Morgar, Radahn and Mohg, at least in my opinion there is not a single great boss on the level of something like Gale, Orphan or Ishin. But with FromSoft DLCs always bringing the best bosses, I expected Shadow of the Earth Tree to bring at least one great boss, and with me now finishing it, I can say it managed to bring two, with one of them being Messmer the Impaler. In my opinion, Messmer is one of the best Elden Ring bosses, but to get what makes me say that about him, I think we should compare him to a fight that is somewhat similar, being Malenia. Messmer and Malenia are both humanoid bosses with a high amount of difficulty, and I'll be comparing the two across a couple of metrics. With the first one of these metrics being consistency. Consistency essentially means that the same action will always lead to the same outcome. For example, the amount of time that a boss stops after doing a certain attack, or the amount of damage that an attack does. Stuff like this being consistent is incredibly important for Souls games, since the way you beat bosses in these games is by learning them through trial and error. Meaning that if things aren't consistent, it just leads to players getting mixed messages and not really knowing what to do against them. And Malenia is probably the least consistent boss I've fought out of any of the Souls games, and it's these couple of factors that make it feel that way. The first thing is that most of her attacks don't really have any recovery needed, meaning she can just chain a ton of attacks together. This means that the amount of attacks you have to dodge before getting a hitting can really range anywhere from, 2 to 20 attacks, leading to extremely annoying situations where she just doesn't stop attacking, and even her attack opportunities that she does give are inconsistent, with her being able to cancel them by dashing away or even blocking you. A great example of what I mean by this is shown in this clip. In this clip, she first does a waterfall dance, then without stopping, instantly thrusts into me, then she cancels her own thrust recovery frames and uses Shadow Clone Jutsu. In this entire attack chain, I have gotten 0 chances to hit her, which feels incredibly unfair for how easily she could kill me here. And her most dangerous attack, which is the Waterfall Dance, doesn't really have a set time where she uses it, meaning you just kind of have to live in constant fear of her using it. But now let's compare all of that to Messmer. Unlike Malenia, Messmer can't chain a bunch of attacks together since he always stops after doing one of these 3 attacks, being this delayed thrust, aerial slam, or just him throwing his weapon like ever. All of these moves completely end his attack chain, which makes sure you always know when you're safe to attack him. And his special attack, which is called Messmer's Assault, since I've never actually seen him use this attack more than once per phase, so unless it's just a me thing, I'm pretty sure it's consistent. Meaning Messmer only really has one consistency issue, which is his second phase snake hitboxes are a bit weird, but other than that he is as consistent as you can really get, and he's much better in this category. For the next metric, I'll be using risk versus reward. In Souls games, the amount of danger that something has should be pretty comparable to its reward, with the biggest example of this being Midir's laser attack, which can kill you very easily but also leaves Midir stunned for like 4 seconds after you use it. And Messmer follows this rule pretty well. Messmer's medium risk attacks, which are the delayed thrust and the long combo that ends up with a slam, both give around 1 heavy attack worth of hits. And his more dangerous attack, like the attack he does at the beginning of both of his phases, or his Messmer's Assault, both give around 2 heavy attacks, which means he satisfies this rule for the most part. Except this one attack in phase 2 where he just runs away after doing a really long combo. But except that, the player actually gets rewarded for dodging him properly. This is something that Malenia completely fails at. Her reward to risk ratio feels incredibly off, where some of her easy attacks like the charge slam or this weird horizontal slash attack both give a hit, while her hardest attack, which is the waterfall dance, gives absolutely nothing. This feels incredibly bad since the waterfall dance can kill you really easily, and for her to use it without any downsides feels just really weird, especially since her other special attack which she gets in phase 2, this weird clone one, actually does give a hit. Overall, Malenia's risk versus reward isn't really all there, and it's just kind of off-putting. And now we move on to my final thoughts about these two. Malenia to me is a boss that is incredibly difficult, but gives up a lot of fairness to become that difficult, with stuff like the waterfall dance being incredibly hard to dodge and one-shotting you, or her having lifesteal for literally no reason, or her just incredibly long attack chains. These things are all really unfun to play against, but the reason for these things being needed to make her difficult is because of how broken the player can get in this game. But even with her having this much weird broken stuff, she still ends up getting abused by many different builds. so it just kind of ends up hurting people who aren't using these broken builds. In my eyes, this makes Malenia incredibly unfair and unfun to fight against, and overall just a bad fight. And I was worried that this trend would continue into the DLC, but thankfully the DLC has proved me wrong, with Messmer being the prime example. Messmer maintains a high amount of difficulty without having to use a bunch of broken mechanics. He doesn't really have anything like super inflated stats, one-shot moves, or just overall randomness. But even without them, he still maintains a good amount of difficulty. But even though he is difficult, he's still really fun to fight against. And he feels less like an Elder Ring boss and reminds me more of the DS3 boss. And this, in my opinion, makes him be better than every base game Elder Ring boss, while he is still harder than most of them. And truthfully, I can say the same for other DLC bosses like the Dancing Lion, Midra, or BAM! But what do you guys think? Is Messmer as good as I say, or am I just more biased towards the DLC bosses? Either way, like and sub if you want more of this stuff.